Welcome to Lau Ming's channel. There is a cursed island in this world with a total population of just over 12,000 people. But 97% of the men and 93% of the women are overweight, making them the most obese population in the world. The islanders suffer from a range of diseases, with rates of type 2 diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, gout, cancer, and dementia far exceeding the global average. This island is called Nauru, located in the Micronesia region of the South Pacific. Island nation. Nauru, with just 21.3 square kilometers, is the world's third smallest country. Men's life expectancy is 60.6 years, and women's is 68 years, among the lowest globally. Historically, Nauruans were thin, lived longer, and had fewer chronic diseases. Over decades, they became obese and ill. What happened? Let's explore the story that changed their lives. However, in the past, the people of Nauru were quite thin, had longer lifespans, and a low incidence of chronic diseases in just a few decades. Why have they turned into obese patients suffering from various ailments? What exactly happened on Nauru? Let's start from the beginning, under the sea, to tell the story of this island nation that changed the people of this island. The time goes back to 1674. British pathologist Thomas Willis discovered a strange phenomenon. Some patients' urine was sweet. Willis discovered sweet urine through the urine of intestinal patients and wrote down the process in his work records. Some people might wonder why you would care about such a boring topic. But it's not boring at all. Only remarkable scientists, driven by the desire to explore pathology and to heal others, would take such significant actions. Willis named this newly discovered condition diabetes, marking the first time humanity recognized this terrifying disease. He found that only wealthy patients seemed to suffer from it, and he believed the cause of diabetes was related to diet. It was because of eating. It was because the patient drank apple juice, beer, and liqueur without restraint that he got the disease. Willis asked his patients not to eat any food soaked in sugar. Although he could not explain the reason, he believed that diabetes and sugar must have some connection. Why didn't diabetes get its first name until 1674? Because it didn't exist before. The earliest records of sugar processing by humans can be found in the reliefs of the Royal Sun Temple in Abu Ghraib, Egypt. From the images, it's clear that this was a complex production process, and only pharaohs and nobles could enjoy honey. Humans have always had a sweet tooth. Being able to eat honey was one of the highest forms of enjoyment in ancient Egypt. Therefore, this process was specially engraved on the relief. This relief was made in the 25th century BC, which is 4,600 years old. The main component of honey is sugar, but it's not the same as the sugar syrup we refer to today. The earliest raw material used was sugarcane, which is why it's also called sucrose. Sucrose originated in India, and by 260 BC, there were already records of the earliest sugar production in India. However, the development of the sugar industry was very slow. It wasn't until the late Middle Ages, around 1453 AD, that there were very few people in the world who had ever tasted sugar, which is unimaginable today. How can we say that people 500 years ago didn't eat sugar? There is archaeological discoveries to prove this. On October 24th, 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius, not far from Pompeii, Italy, erupted, and many victims were buried under volcanic ash. After 2,000 years, human tissues weathered into the ground, forming many human cavities. Archaeologists injected lime into the voids to create lime casts of ancient human remains. Scientists found that the teeth of these ancient people, dating back over 2,000 years, were very well preserved, with very few showing signs of cavities. British archaeologists also discovered the remains of 2,000 medieval individuals, and similarly, very few had cavities. This indicates that ancient people rarely, or almost never, consumed sugar. 500 years ago, sugar was a precious and scarce commodity. Its price was comparable to gold, which is why some referred to sugar as white gold. However, humanity's pursuit of sugar is endless, and everything changed in the 15th century. Out. This beautiful little island is located in the eastern part of the North Atlantic and is called Madeira. It's the hometown of the famous football star Cristiano Ronaldo. In 1425, the Portuguese attempted to cultivate sugarcane on the Madeira Islands, and to their surprise, the climate here was particularly suitable for sugarcane growth. Madeira became a famous sugarcane plantation area. Growing sugarcane is very labor-intensive and is a physically demanding industry. Colonizers captured a large number of slaves from Africa to work in sugar production. With suitable soil and a plentiful labor force, the sugar industry began to thrive. As time went on, sugar production techniques and planting methods spread from Madeira to all corners of the world, marking the official entry of humanity's diet into the era of sweet treats. Trouble arises little by little. First, Queen Elizabeth I of England, a European noble, loved sugar so much that, in her time, sugar was not refined and processed like it is today. It was mixed with many impurities. As a result, she ended up with a blackened tooth, which looked very unattractive. He kept his mouth closed. King Louis XIV of France had sugar cavities. His dentist, Dubois, used a hot rod, causing pain but not eliminating them. Cheaper sugar led to more consumption, weight gain, and diseases linked to sugar. The king was in so much pain that he would rather die than die, but the tooth decay was still not killed. As the sugar industry continued to develop, the price of sugar continued to fall, and the poor people began to eat a lot of sugar, and people's weight was not only increasing year by year. Chronic diseases are also on the rise. It all seems to be related to sugar. On August 2nd, 1893, Harvard medical student Elliot Joslin recorded the world's first diabetes registry at Massachusetts General Hospital. The female patient he recorded was named Mary Higgins. She experienced dry mouth, drank water all day, urinated 3 to 4 times a night, felt weak and fatigued, had constipation and dizziness, and experienced a strong burning sensation in her stomach after meals. This female patient was only 26 years old, but severe diabetes had already overwhelmed her kidneys. Joslin believed that her condition was related to her excessive sugar consumption. So, what exactly is sugar? By 1900, scholars had already been able to distinguish between different types of sugar found in nature. Based on their molecular composition, sugars are mainly divided into 3 types: monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Monosaccharides are the most basic form of sugar, consisting of a single sugar molecule, including fructose, galactose, and glucose. They are the fundamental building blocks of all other types of sugars. When fructose and glucose are chemically bonded together, they form a disaccharide. The most common disaccharide is sucrose. It is composed of glucose and fructose. Polysaccharides are long chains made up of multiple monosaccharide molecules. These types of sugars have diversity in both structure and function. Common polysaccharides include cellulose, starch, and glycogen. Cellulose is the main component of plant cell walls. Starch, which is found in foods like potatoes and corn, also exists in grains such as wheat and rice, and it serves as a form of energy storage for plants. When humans consume these foods, the digestive system breaks down the starch into glucose molecules, providing energy for the activities of body cells. What happens to excess sugar? It gets stored in the liver and muscles. The stored polysaccharide is called glycogen. What is the treatment method proposed by Dr. Joslin? It's the strict restriction of carbohydrate intake. What are carbohydrates? The 3 types of sugars we just talked about, monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides, are collectively referred to as carbohydrates. In other words, it means strictly controlling sugar intake. After implementing Joslin's diet and exercise plan, the mortality rate among patients decreased by 20%. Joslin's treatment was a great success, and he became a legend in the history of diabetes treatment. By the way, Joslin also invented the earliest blood glucose meter, and the Joslin Clinic he founded is still the largest diabetes clinic in the world today. But here's the problem. Anyone who controls their diet and boosts their exercise, watching what you eat and getting moving, can improve health. Joslin's treatment method is effective, but it doesn't mean that diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes, is solely related to excess sugar. Fast forward to 1899, and the small island of Nauru in the Pacific sparked change. New Zealand geologist Albert Ellis saw an odd stone at the entrance of his office in Sydney. He saw the stone was unique. He tested a piece and found it was a type of phosphate from bird or bat droppings. New Zealand geologist Albert Ellis saw a very peculiar stone at the entrance of his office in Sydney. She immediately noticed that this stone was different from the others. Some said it was the root of a planned tree, but Ellis didn't think so. She took a small piece for testing, and was amazed to discover that it was a type of phosphate formed from the deposits of bird or bat droppings. Under long-term geological processes, phosphates combine with calcium to form phosphate rock. Phosphate deposits are an important raw material for producing phosphate fertilizers and have enormous economic value. Ellis then asked, where did this phosphate rock come from? People told him that the phosphate rock came from Nauru, and because of this accidental discovery, Nauru became prosperous. 80% of Nauru's land is covered with phosphate rock, which is the most precious gift bestowed upon this small island by nature. In 1906, a German company was the first to mine phosphate in Nauru. By 1968, Nauru had developed 1/3 of the island's land, selling the phosphate mining rights to mining companies. The trust fund reached over $1 billion, but the entire island only has a few thousand residents. This made Nauru one of the richest countries in the world. Every islander enjoys free medical care, dental care, education, and public transportation. And they don't have to pay taxes. Nauruans use $50 bills to buy food in stores. And they never have to earn change after buying things. Nauruans live a good life of luxury, but good and bad are interdependent. And disaster is slowly approaching Nauru. In just 15 years, the obesity rate among Nauruans skyrocketed from 2% to 15%, and the prevalence of chronic diseases among the islanders significantly increased. What happened? Fast forward to 1972, when British nutritionist John Yudkin published a book. It's called Pure, White, and Deadly. In this book, he was the first to warn humanity about the potential addictiveness of sugar. How does sugar affect our brains? It's a series of physiological responses. When sugar enters the mouth, it triggers the sweet taste receptors on the taste buds of the tongue. These receptors send signals to the brainstem, and the signals are then transmitted to a specific area in the upper part of the cerebral cortex that is dedicated to processing sweet taste information. When the information reaches this area, something magical happens. The signals activate one of the most important reward systems in the brain, which is the famous dopamine system. Dopamine is an important neurotransmitter, and a large release of dopamine can create intense feelings of pleasure and satisfaction. To continuously experience this pleasure, people will repeatedly engage in these behaviors. So yes, eating sugar can really be addictive. Many young children will cry or even throw tantrums if they are not given sugar. We can't blame the kids. It's because their brains need sugar to produce dopamine, which makes them feel happy. To verify that sugar can be addictive, scientists conducted animal experiments. Researchers at Princeton University had 43 mice become addicted to both drugs and sugar, then let the mice choose between taking drugs or eating sugar. The results surprised the scientists. 40 out of the 43 mice chose to eat sugar. The scientists couldn't believe the results, so they conducted another experiment with a new set of 43 mice. This time, all 43 mice chose to eat sugar. This shows that for mice, sugar is even more addictive than drugs. It seems that Yudkin's theory is correct. Sugar can be addictive like drugs, and this is a biological fact. Now, let's return to Nauru. It's 1983, and in just 15 years, Nauru has developed the remaining 2/3 of its land, completely destroying all agriculture on the island. In the past, there were still some crops alongside coconuts, but now there are almost none left. However, the people of Nauru aren't worried because they have plenty of money. Their food has completely turned into imported processed foods. Those more convenient and tastier foods are all products that have been deeply processed by food manufacturing companies. Here, I must mention a concept that is well known in the food processing industry called the bliss point. The bliss point was proposed by a Hungarian mathematician in the 1970s and was quickly adopted by the global food industry. In food and beverages, there exists an optimal concentration. For example, sweetness has a maximum value. Once you exceed that maximum by adding more sugar, people will feel overwhelmed and find it cloying. But if there's too little, you won't reach the maximum pleasure. So the sugar in food is usually at the maximum level that we can accept, which makes everything taste really good and gives that feeling of not being able to stop once you start eating. The goal of food companies is to maximize their product sales. So they carefully design the flavors of food to stimulate our taste buds and make our brains release more dopamine. This is mainly achieved through sugar. There are thousands of processed foods on the market, and over 75% of them contain sugar. People unknowingly consume a large amount of sugar. Soon, Nauru became one of the countries with the highest per capita sugar intake in the world. In just one generation, overweight individuals could be seen everywhere on the island. But the nightmare didn't stop there. Research shows that if a mother has diabetes before giving birth, More than half of her children will be obese by their teenage years. The people of Nauru are in a predicament. They don't grow their own food and can only eat imported processed foods. Nauruans are caught up in the bliss of these processed foods, as the dopamine reward keeps them hooked. The more they eat, the heavier they get, and the excess fructose is converted into fat by the liver. This increases the risk of heart disease and hypertension, and it can also lead to increased inflammation in the body. Frequent consumption of large amounts of sugar increases the body's demand for insulin. Long-term excess can lead to insulin resistance, which may eventually develop into type 2 diabetes. About 40% of Nauru's residents have type 2 diabetes, making Nauru the country with the highest diabetes prevalence in the world. And people will pass on the genes for obesity to the next generation. The people of Nauru are caught in a vicious cycle. By 2006, the phosphate mining in Nauru was completed, and the good days for the Nauruans came to an end. There are many problems facing people today, but obesity is at the forefront. The story of the people of Nauru serves as a wake-up call for the world. He tells us that we must face the dangers of consuming sugar. Some friends might say that using Nauru as an example to condemn sugar consumption isn't very scientific, right? But in fact, there are many other regions around the world with similar cases. The story background of the Hollywood movie Killers of the Flower Moon is based on a true event of excessive sugar consumption. In the 1920s, large amounts of oil were discovered on Indian reservations in Oklahoma, USA. Overnight, the Indians in this area became rich. After they had money, these Indians ate a lot of sugar, and they soon developed type 2 diabetes. Movie star DiCaprio played a vicious villain. He poisoned his Indian wife's insulin in order to kill her, and seized the huge fortune. In addition to the Osage in the movie, the Pima and Navajo in the American Indians also destroyed their bodies because of a large number of ponds. The rate of diabetes is among the highest in the world. All this evidence shows that sugar poses a significant threat to health. We ask, how much sugar is safe? The FDA says less than 19.05 kgs a year is safe, but this is hard to grasp. People can't track sugar daily. What to do? Since foods have sugar, avoid adding more. Skip it if possible. Best to cut sugar entirely. But this standard is really hard to grasp. The average person can't carry around a scale and a calculator to track how much sugar they eat every day. So what should we do? My suggestion is that since the foods we eat every day already contain a lot of sugar, we should avoid actively consuming sugar. If we can skip it, we should. The best approach is to cut out sugar altogether. Because the consequences of sugar consumption often take 20 years to show, we need to take immediate action while there's still time to turn things around. What exactly is sugar? Sugar is an addictive substance. It's a sweet, chronic poison. All right, that's it for today's story. Don't forget to follow Lao Ming's channel, and we'll chat again in the next episode.